Did you know that Japanese cuisine isn't specifically limited to traditional dishes like sushi or ramen? Japan has taken inspirations from various different foreign cuisines, making its own unique cuisine, Japanese fusion food. Japan didn't open up their borders until just a couple of hundred years ago in 1853, which is when Western influence seeped into Japanese culture. Since then, Japan has adapted and put their own spin on other cuisines. In fact, many traditional Japanese dishes are actually adaptations of dishes from other countries. For example, ramen is adapted from China and sushi is adapted from Korea. Japan is amazing at taking something and then creating something new and fresh from it. In the recent years, more and more Japanese fusion dishes have been popping up. This is done in the spirit of innovation, but also to create a taste that's more suitable and appealing to Westerners' tastes. Because of that, some traditional Japanese dishes have been modified and creating a hybrid of Western Japanese fusion dishes. Some of them might sound a little bit weird, even a bit disgusting, but if you're interested, definitely check them out. So what exactly is Japanese fusion food? Basically, food fusion is the infusion of elements of traditional dishes from a variety of foreign cuisines. Food fusion can also refer to the combination of different types of cooking and be presented in a mixture of forms. Fusion dishes can also be based on one particular culture, but prepared with ingredients and combinations of flavors linked with another culture. The purpose of fusion food is to provide unique and imaginative dishes that offer new flavors and new experiences. Fusion food has become so popular over the recent years that it has even become recognized as a national cuisine in itself. Japanese fusion cuisine combines the type of dishes often found in Western countries like steak, hamburger, and omelets with only Japanese ingredients. This technique not only adds a Japanese twist on the original dish, but it also alters the flavors to suit the Japanese people's taste buds. Okay, let's have a look at different types of Japanese fusion dishes. In Japanese fusion cuisine, there are different types. Some examples are Japanese fused with French, American, Indian, and Mexican. You might have heard of wafu, the Japanese style. Wafu is simply defined as Japanese style. Ever since the Japanese have been exposed to Western culture, they've been more and more inventive. This has led them to add variations in their Japanese style food. Let's talk a little bit about Yoshoku. Yoshoku is a term that refers to Western style dishes. During the Meiji Restoration in Japan, there was a high demand for modernization. Western food culture was actively imported into Japan. The Meiji Restoration was a set of structural reforms aiming to westernize every institution, from state systems, industries, and military to education and culture. The adoption of Western food cuisines was also triggered after the reforms. Yoshoku is often written in katakana because it features Western dishes. Even though they may look slightly familiar, the flavors are completely different. An example is omurice. By just looking at it, it looks like an ordinary omelet with sauce on top, but actually it has stir-fried rice in the middle. This is just one of the many examples. If you can think of another one, definitely let us know in the comment section down below. Then we've got Japanese French. Japanese chefs traveled and studied in France during 1960s, and they came back with tons of flavors, techniques, and styles of cooking. Implementing the traditionals and cultures of French cuisine into Japanese food has created a fusion of Japanese French. One famous fusion dish is the croquette, which is a bowl covered in breadcrumbs and filled with vegetables, fish, or meat. And there's also foie gras, which is a staple dish of the French made with the liver of a goose or duck. But they all are adjusted to the liking of the Japanese here by using different sauces from Japan. Then let's talk about Japanese Italian. Pastas and pizzas are found all over Japan, but they're typically not the types that you can find in Italy or anywhere else. Italian food is extremely popular in Japan. Japanese have introduced different Italian dishes like Napolitan pasta and doria. The Napolitan is the Japanese take on the spaghetti bolognese, while the doria is a stir-fried dish consisting of rice, ketchup, and cooked meat or seafood topped with layers of cheese and white sauce. High-class Japanese chefs have preserved many Italian seafood dishes that are forgotten in other countries. These include pasta with prawns, lobsters, as well as crab, which is an Italian specialty, and in Japan it's served with a different species of crab, and there's also pasta with sea urchin sauce. Okay, now let's talk about Japanese Mexican fusion food. Mexican cuisine was introduced in the 1980s, a while later after the majority of the other foreign cuisines were. Taco rice, a Japanese-style Mexican dish that started in Okinawa to cater to the US military, bloomed significantly, and that's when the Japanese showed interest in the Mexican dishes like tacos and burritos. Clearly, the Mexican flavors and the Japanese flavors are quite different, so don't expect Mexican restaurants in Japan to cater to your spicy taste buds. They're pretty much wafu style. There's also the popular Mexican sushi roll that's finding its way into many different sushi restaurants around the world. The roll usually contains a tempura shrimp and some kind of salsa or spicy sauce. Tomatoes and avocados are also sometimes added. Alright, let's talk about Japanese Chinese. Japanese Chinese cuisine, or chuka, Hakka is a style of Japanese cuisine served by Chinese restaurants popularized in Japan in the late 19th century and more recent times. There's a lot of talk and confusion because both Japanese and Chinese reject that this food is a pure form of its own cuisine, but it's clear that this food is found a lot in Japan. The Shippoku style of cooking displays a lot of influence from Chinese cuisine. Chinese influence is the biggest in Japan's food fusion culture. The most popular Japanese-Chinese fusion dish that we know of and love is none other than ramen. Ramen is originated from China decades and centuries ago, and the Japanese have combined their own style of cooking and flavors, which has made a unique version of Japanese ramen. Gyoza is also originally a Chinese dish that the Japanese reinvented with their own individual style. In Japan, you can get all forms of Japanese Chinese gyoza, from boiled to deep fried. Japanese-style Chinese cuisine is now commonly available all over Japan. Japanese restaurants are often specialized to offer only one type of dish, so fusion cuisine is focused primarily on dishes found in 3 different distinct types of restaurants. There's the ramen restaurants, dim sum houses, and standard Chinese-style restaurants. Alright, let's talk about Japanese Indian. Japanese curries have been inspired by Indian cuisine, also known as Desi cuisine. Indian cooking was introduced to the Japanese in the late 1800s. Different from the spicy and hot Indian curries, Japanese curries have their own style and taste. The Japanese usually prefer sweet over spicy, which makes Japanese curries sweet. From the sweet curry or omelette curry, no cuisine is quite like the Japanese-Indian fusion. One of the most popular and delicious dishes is the classic Japanese chicken curry with tender pieces of chicken, carrots, and potato cooked in a rich, savory curry sauce. This Japanese version of curry is a must-try. Alright, now let's talk about Japanese Peruvian dishes. The word Nikkei is used to describe people of Japanese descent who live as immigrants in a foreign country. But nowadays, the word Nikkei is usually referred to a fusion cuisine, the Japanese Peruvian cuisine. In 1899, when the first group of immigrants migrated to Peru, they started to adjust and adopt the Peruvian culture quite quickly. These Japanese Peruvians slowly started to establish small community business, salons, shops, as well as restaurants. Nikkei cuisine is a combination of distinct techniques and flavors of Peru and Japan. Seafood is a big part of this cuisine. Peruvian ingredients like lime, corn, and chili and potatoes went into forming the core of Nikkei. The chili soy flavor combination appears to be a perfect match. In this period of time, Nikkei cuisine is slowly becoming recognized for the powerhouse that it is. Ceviche is often considered Peru's favorite dish. When it comes to the Nikkei approach to ceviche, lime is added only for a few minutes on the fish before serving, keeping it from overcooking. Also, ginger is added to provide the additional flavors as well as soy sauce. Now that we've talked about all the different Japanese fusion styles, let's take a look at the top 11 specific Japanese fusion dishes that I'd like to recommend you to try. Check out the video in the description box down below or head over here and I'll see you over there in the next video.